Hello, everyone. This is VC, and I was just thinking. I was thinking after I recorded the video that just went up yesterday, because I just recorded it yesterday. The Smash character archetype video, which you should definitely watch if you're interested in Smash. I was thinking how I really enjoy doing sort of long form explanatory content similar to the likes of BKC, one of my favorite YouTubers who does Pokemon stuff. I am very passionate about gaming, and I have a lot of gaming opinions and knowledge that I want to share. This video falls more into the former category. While yesterday's video was mostly very informative, today's is pretty opinionated. Now, these opinions will not just be me placing, how I think all of these games are on this tier list. I will be backing them up with lots of reasoning. But it is opinion. So if you have a differing opinion, that's perfectly fine. And I would love to hear your reasons why. But with that out of the way, this video is regarding the Metroid series, specifically the 2D Metroid series, because, going to be completely honest, I have played part of Prime 1, and that's it. I haven't played any other 3D games. I've only played the multiplayer mode of Hunters, and I've never played Federation Force. So we're really just looking at the 2D games here. I won't be ranking AM2R, because this is just meant to be going over the official games, but I can tell you where I would put it. So without any further, I'll mention that when I get there. Without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. I'm going to be going, I already know where all the games are going to go, just bottom to top, starting with Metroid Samus Returns. Now, being last on a list, not usually a great thing to be. And well, I think this is the weakest game in the series, in the 2D series, it's still a really good game. It's still, to be frank, like one of the other franchises that I am as invested in as I am with Metroid is Pokemon, and despite having many fantastic Pokemon games on the system, Samus Returns is at least a contender for my favorite 3DS game out of all of them. And even amongst the other 3DS games that I play that aren't Pokemon, which is definitely a thing that I do. I did not just buy that system to play Pokemon and Samus Returns, but the point is, the game's really good. So with that out of the way, what are its flaws? Why is it not as high as any other game? Well, first, I want to address what it does wrong as a remake. In that, I think that it does not really preserve the atmosphere of Metroid 2, which is the main appeal of that game. The really desolate, lonely atmosphere is really what gives that game its beauty. And Metroid Samus Returns puts so much emphasis on combat that it kind of detracts from that. It doesn't ever stop to just let you be. And I'll talk a bit more about that in depth when I go over Metroid 2. But for now, I'll just go over the non-remakey side of things. So one, enemies in this game, very annoying. I think the melee counter was a great idea. And it's a good addition to the game, especially in an environment where enemies can approach you from any direction. I don't always want to just, stand and try to swivel my little gyro around and aim in all different directions to try to catch the bats swooping at me from every direction. I'd rather just be able to hit them when they get close to me. The melee counter really makes Samus's kit feel more complete than it ever has before, and that was definitely necessary going into this sort of 2.5D style. But the problems with the melee counter is that the game likes the melee counter way too much. It feels like most of the enemies in the game, even just the basic generic enemies that you find in literally every room, force you to use the melee counter. And it can make navigating the world a drag because you're always having to stop and wait for an attack and counter it and then do the whole little animation thing and then you start moving again, you know? Instead of you just run and like the enemies, like normally evading enemies is an option in Metroid games, and it's kind of an option here, but not really. The enemies are designed so that you use the melee counter against them, and because of that, they're difficult to evade. They'll rush you down. They'll take initiative. And that's really frustrating when the melee counter takes so much time to do, you know, even if it's only a couple seconds, like that only a couple of seconds really adds up when you have to do it hundreds of times over the course of the game. Other than that, I'll go into some strengths of the game because really this is the whole thing about this whole series. Not a whole lot of weaknesses to go over. I'm mostly going to have positive things to say. This game, I like the boss fights a lot. Especially the Queen Metroid boss fight is probably my favorite Metroid boss fight out of the entire series. Not like boss fight against Metroid, but my favorite boss fight in the Metroid series. The way that it takes advantage of all of the power-ups that you've gotten to that point, you know? You learn her attacks. I like boss fights, and this is maybe a bit of an abnormal thing, but I really like boss fights where you have to play it many times before you win. Because you can feel that sense of progression and growth as you start to learn the boss fight and figure out timings to avoid attacks and what the startup animation, like what each animation corresponds to in terms of attacks. Especially in Metroid, it's great because the whole series is about progression and growth. The battle theme is fantastic. Metroid battle themes are usually very non-musical, I guess, like almost like trap kind of music where it's chromatic sometimes to the point of being like microtonal, you know, like carried mostly by drums that don't really hit actual notes. It's just the rhythm giving it energy. This theme, really the instrumentation in this game being able to be so high quality, at least relative to the other games, because it is still the 3DS, really brings that out so much more in this game than the other games, and that's nowhere more obvious than in the Queen Metroid's theme. I also like how it references other themes, like the Surface of SR388 theme, and the Mother Brain boss fight theme from Super Metroid. I thought that was really cool. And yes, I really like how you kind of have to use all of your power-ups, you know, all the abilities that you've learned along your mission. It adds a sense of finality. And that only makes it hurt more that that's undercut by, and major spoilers, something that I actually wasn't aware of until several years after the game came out. Ridley is the secret final boss of the game. You fight Proteus Ridley, which is this in-between phase of Meta Ridley from the Prime games and normal Ridley as we see him in the opening of Super Metroid. After the Queen Metroid. And, like, Ridley's cool, whatever. I like the arrangement of his theme a lot. But... Oh, and the boss fight's fun, but it's not as climactic and final as the Queen Metroid boss fight. And it really ruins the end of the game, you know? That, like, suddenly this stops just being a faithful remake of Metroid 2, you know, and becomes just fan service, you know, Metroid fan service. And usually this series does fan service in ways that really make sense. Like, seeing old enemies and bosses reappear, usually it's in a way that actually makes sense within the story. Here, there's just so many questions that didn't need to be raised, you know, regarding, like, how did Ridley know that Samus was here? Like, how did he know? You know, like, why, if the space pirates are just finding out about this, like, I mean, first of all, how? And then, like, why, if they knew about it, why didn't they step in before it was too late? It's just really weird. So yeah, it's a game that leaves me with mixed feelings, but one that I'm always glad to revisit. And for context, I replay all of these games annually. So these games are, like, always kind of fresh in my mind. All right, I'm back. I just took a brief break, and I think I was just about to move on to the next game. Okay, so Metroid NES. What's not to love? Well, I'll tell you what's not to love. Starting back at the top of the zone really sucks anytime you die. Starting with 30 HP really sucks anytime you die. Boss fights are pretty much just like you spam missiles. I do like how with Kraid and Ridley, like, you want to freeze their projectiles in order to keep yourself from getting pushed back when you fight them. That's a neat little thing, though I can't say I'm positive that's intentional. I like the bugginess of the game. Like, the ability to, like, just climb up doors and end up in other hallways is really neat and funny. It inadvertently offers a good way to avoid excessive backtracking if you go down the wrong hallway and don't notice for a while, because the rooms all look the same. Now, this game, my placement of this game is maybe boosted by the fact that it's basically Zero Mission is a faithful recreation of this game. And I am a low-level Zero Mission speedrunner. So I know the correct route through the entire game. So I don't get lost a whole lot. But, you know, I really like the layout of the map. Like, it feels big without ever feeling like you can travel too far away from where you're supposed to be, you know? It feels like there's so many options, even though it's still it's an NES game map, you know? It's small, but they make it feel really big with the way that they laid out the rooms. I like the pitch black backgrounds. I guess, is that only in... I want to say Norfair has a unique background in that game, but I might be totally making that up. The music's cool. I like Brinstar's theme. I really, really like Kraid's theme. Can we talk about the original version of Norfair, though? Like, look that song up if you haven't heard it. It's so So weird. So weird. Well, anyways. I think one of the things about this game is that really, if you're not a devout Metroid fan, like, if you don't want to get the whole series experience, bless me. Excuse me. There's not much reason to go back to this game. Also, unless for nostalgia purposes, I guess. I am a minor, so I don't have nostalgia for the NES era. But I think it's a good game, and I enjoy playing it as somebody who's very familiar with its remake, and with the rest of the series. I mean, it's just a great time to revisit where this series came from, you know? I like that it feels kind of dated and kind of clunky, you know, because I think that imperfections, this is like one of the things I love most about Undertale, which is like one of my favorite games of all time, like more favorite than most of the Metroid games, which is really, really saying something, is that it's not perfect. I think it's such a phenomenally well-designed, smart, touching, emotional, funny game. But it has flaws. It has obvious flaws. And that just makes it so much more endearing. You know, there are parts where the story doesn't really make sense, or things that seem to make little continuity errors, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. But that just makes me love it more, because it's like... It's like almost making it feel more human. You know, it's a game, so it's not human. But, like, having those flaws really highlights what makes the rest of the game so great. And to be frank, this is going to sound a little mean, but, like, Metroid 1 as a clunky, outdated game, you know, being able to see how this series got started, you know, what it was trying to do and the ways that it didn't quite make it, really just amplifies all of the later games that did achieve what this game wanted to be, you know? That created a more open world, a game that could have a much longer playthrough time without needing to be absurdly difficult, you know? Heavily progression-based game, like this kind of stuff. The roots were there in Metroid 1, and that's what makes it so fun to revisit, is to see how these ideas first got started out, because it makes you appreciate the later games more. So that's kind of Metroid 1. I mean, it's great, and definitely worth a play if you're really interested in Metroid. Otherwise, even though I put it above Samus Returns, if you're just a casual player, this is the only one that I would say you're not going to miss much by just skipping it. Up next, not going to go into much detail, but this game is good. It has some flaws. I think it fixed a lot of the issues I had with Samus Returns. I'm not finished yet, by the way. I'm not going to go into detail because I'm not finished, so my opinions might change, and because spoilers are still a thing, and I want this video to not spoil this game, at least. But maybe later I'll make another video just going over Dread in detail. Point is, this game has a couple major issues still. Boss fights have been pretty hit or miss so far, where I'm at. Some of them really feel like the space where the boss fight takes place was just not designed for a boss fight, or for that particular boss fight. Like, sometimes trying to navigate around the room can be part of the fun in a boss fight. but not so much here. Usually it feels more frustrating and like obstacles that are just there to be annoying more than to create a challenge. It creates a frustrating challenge instead of an engaging challenge, you know. But other than that, I mean, I love Samus is a lot faster than she has been before. So the map is really, it feels really big and grand, you know, because everything is big. But Samus moves fast, so it doesn't get tedious. You can get across the massive map of any individual area without feeling like just a huge slog. So yeah, I mean, it's a really good game. I definitely play this game if you like Metroid. I think it brings back a lot of the best elements of Samus Returns, a lot of the best elements of Fusion. Oh, it improves the melee counter. Yeah, you can use that while running. The animation, I can't actually say for sure if it's faster or not because I haven't timed it out, but it feels a lot snappier. And you don't need it for most enemies. Most enemies you can just blast through. It adds a lot to the boss fights it's in, because using it against certain boss attacks causes them to drop health and ammo. So you can make it back out of a corner where you felt like you were just going to lose, and it makes the boss fights feel more dynamic and engaging than before. So yeah, it's good. All right, moving on. Here goes my most controversial placement, probably. Super Metroid. Keep in mind, this is still a really, really, really good game. Like, I have them labeled like S, A, B, C here, you know, relative to each other. But if we're talking like relative to other games, we're talking like S, A plus, A minus, or B plus. Like, really, these are all good games. But Super, I mean, it's the definitive Metroidvania. Even though Zero Mission is the, like, faithful remake of Metroid 1, I think this game kind of carries on and builds off Metroid 1. It feels more like the successor to Metroid 1 than any of the other games in the series. The way that the story is conveyed in this game is great. Just through show, not tell, for the most part. Other than the opening sequence, which the opening sequence is so charming. Like, I love seeing the recreation of the end of Metroid 2 in a 16-bit style. I like the artwork of, like, Samus handing over the baby Metroid to the Ceres people, you know, like, that the visuals in this game are very nice. That's a whole thing. Like, I really like 16-bit graphics. Perfect in between of feeling gamey and detailed. Samus as a character feels really good to control in this game. Her new abilities, like the speed booster, is wonderful. I know everybody always talks about the speed booster, but it is fantastic. Of course, the space jump returns from Metroid 2 and controls better, but still not very well. So there's that. But she's got all kinds of crazy things, like, what do they call it? The X Factor, where if you enable just one beam upgrade and then charge while having Power Bomb activated, like, you do a special effect depending on what the beam is. You have the Crystal Flash, where you can trade in ammo to get health back. You just feel like you have options in this game. The floatiness I don't particularly care for. It does feel like spacey, you know, like you're roaming through an alien world, you know, gravity feels different here. Like, and that's neat. From like a a kind of atmosphere perspective. In terms of gameplay, I don't really like it. I like the heavier Samus from the GBA games. And it's also a faithful recreation of the way that Samus felt in Metroid 1. She doesn't have the quite the same bounciness in the morph ball that she had in Metroid 1, which is something I really, really liked in that game that didn't get carried over into the 16-bit era. But yeah, like in that game, if you like dropped off of a ledge in morph ball, like you would bounce a little bit when you hit the ground. I just think that's a really, really neat touch that I don't know why they didn't carry that over, but yeah, I mean, it feels really good to play. The boss fights in the game are really good. I like the Dragon with the like the thing in the room that you have to grapple onto. You have to break away the cap and then grapple onto it, and like if you've got enough health, you know, you'll both take damage, but Dragon will die first. Like, it's such a cool thing that rewards you for thinking outside the box, you know. I like how like the Geek Critique talks about this a little bit in his Super Metroid video, which I do recommend. I think it's really good, and I'll try not to go over too much stuff he talks about. But like a great example of the openness of the game is when you go into the elevator to Norfair, and then there's the little, you know, grotesque monster thing that takes you to Kraid. How you need the high jump boots to be able to just jump up there, but you can pretty easily make the wall jump off of that one block. If you just jump from the ledge on the other side of the room, that easily could have been avoided by just making it 1 or 2 tiles higher or making the room like 2 tiles wider, but they didn't. Because they wanted that to be possible. Because they wanted it to be like, if you're playing this game through the second time, you can go there without the high jump boots. It might just be a little bit harder. They wanted to give the player options to not play the game exactly how they had designed. I like how much of the game just kind of opens up to you once you get some of the key upgrades. Super Metroid Rotation is a ROM hack of this game that I actually like more than the original. But really, it's an example of how good the game's design is, that they only have to make minimal changes to the layouts of a few rooms in order to make it so you can beat the entire game while everything but Samus is rotated 90 degrees. Like, her ability to move through the environment, the progression, you know, like, there's always a way forward as long as you know how to find it. So yeah, Super Metroid is a great game. Like, there's a reason it's the definitive Metroidvania. Why is it not up higher? Well, it just doesn't have some of the things that some of the games above it have. So I'll move on to what's probably another controversial placement. The game above it, it's the only game in B tier, and then we'll move on to A tier. Metroid Fusion. So this game is also it's a controversial Metroid game, to be sure. It's definitely more liked than, you know, other... Oh, wait a second. I was going to say, if I was ranking AM2R, it would go here. More effective remake than Samus Returns. Feels a bit more, like, open-worldy, less combat-focused. Good game, but I don't think it has quite a place in this list, really, because it... You know, as... It's a great Metroidvania, but it feels kind of more like an indie Metroidvania than like a main series Metroid game. Metroid Fusion. Yeah, this game, it's not a game a lot of people agree on. A lot of people say it's their least favorite. A lot of people say it's their favorite. I think it's really good. The horror elements of this game are wonderfully well done. Like, there's an area, I talk about this all the time. There's a room in the game. It's a path that splits off into 2 branches. You can go up and there's an item, or you can go down and then there's like a hallway you can't go up or something like that, you know? You step into that room And if you go up, you get the item, and then as you're walking out, you hear this explosion sound, you know, and you know the SAX is nearby. And when you go down, you try to go down to run away, get out of there. The door that you came through has been destroyed, and so has the other door. So your only option is to fall through the floor, presumably to follow the SAX wherever it's going. Like, and the wonderful thing about it is that, like, the first time I played the game, I had that experience, I was so freaked out, you know? Like, the SAX is a really scary villain up until towards the end of the game. And every subsequent time that I've played the game, that moment was so impactful for me. I mean, I first played this game when I was like 7. And that was like 10 years ago, you know? But every single subsequent time I've played this game, which I've done quite many times, I always remember that first time. Every time I step into that little forking hallway, and I mean forking as in it forks into two paths, I always think back to that. And instead of feeling terrified when it happens, I feel so much dread leading up to it. You know, like, I know it's going to happen. It's still scary. It's almost scarier. Yeah, and that's kind of how, like, a lot of the horror stuff in Metroid Fusion feels. Like, the first time I played it, it was a really scary game. You know, stuff surprised me and caught me off guard, and I was really terrified not knowing what was going to come next. And now I play the game, and I'm even more terrified knowing what's going to come next. Like, the time that you have to drop down on the SAX, after doing the reactor core thing, the backup generator, I always get into a panic before I drop down there. Like, I always, almost like, I will wait, I'll sit up there, I'll, like, take deep breaths, you know? Almost part of me is, like, waiting to see if I just wait long enough, is the thing just gonna go away? But of course it's not. I already know that, you know? Eventually I have to drop down in front of it, and it sees me, and it gives chase. It's so scary. I love how in that part where it chases you, the only reason that it can't catch you is because you use your power grip to climb up and roll into a ball, which is something it can't do. You know, like, that's the only thing you have over it, is the ability to climb and roll into a ball. And it's like, that just makes, you know, just that, like, that knowledge that, like, that is the one thing you have over the SAX makes it just feel so much more terrifying. Almost more terrifying than if you didn't have anything over it, because now you have perspective. And I point out that moment in particular because I'm actually going to come back to it, if I remember, when I talk about Zero Mission. So what are some problems with this game that hold it back from being like S tier? Actually, mission-based gameplay. That's the most controversial part of this game, and I like it a lot. Each of the areas feels really well designed. Having the game split up into these artificial sectors allows so much more diversity within a relatively small map size, because, I mean, you have to remember, excuse me, this is a GBA game, and even if it has more room to work with than, like, an NES game or a Game Boy game, we're still not getting any Super Metroid maps out here, you know? But the environments feel even more diverse than Super Metroid's, because it's split into these artificial sectors, you know? And it's got this off-putting but beautiful balance of nature and technology. All right. Oh, yeah. And then the mission system, you know, you feel like you never get too far off the beaten path, but you still have some freedom for how you get there, you know? Like, it tells you where you're supposed to get, and you have to figure out how to get there. Sometimes it's a bit more restrictive, and I'm not a big fan of that. But all in all, I mean, yeah, I like the mission structure. Now, to move on to flaws with the game, there's just as much, as I have good things to say about it, it does have its flaws. The boss fights are so hit or miss, and there's so many of them. Like, I feel like I like that there's a lot of them, because it makes each mission feel like it's really got a climactic conclusion when it's got a boss fight at the end. But I feel like if there were less of them, maybe the few that we had would be better designed. I really like quite a few of the ones that are there. I like Yakuza, the spider that gives you the space jump. How it, like, the way that it encroaches down on you, the kind of building tension. That's something Fusion does a lot of, and I like that. And I really like when it does the whole spinny thing, and like it just gives you enough time to react and shoot a missile, but then it's like it moves so fast now it's terrifying. It does both. It moves so slow it's terrifying, and then it moves so fast it's terrifying. It's great. I really like the Ceres boss fight, the water serpent that gives you the speed booster. Sometimes it can be annoying. It'll feel like it just pops out of somewhere, and like, how was I supposed to react to that? And then you get hit, But for the most part, it feels like it's just the right window. I really like the nightmare fight. I like the hanging up on the wall. It feels dynamic because it's like it approaches you and you're like, I know I can safely get in this many shots, before it hits me. But like, if I want to risk it, maybe I can go for one or two more. Like, that makes it feel like, you can kind of adapt your gameplay style to like, am I like really low health? Like, I don't know if I'm going to survive another round. Maybe I should really just put it all on the table. Or like, maybe I'm at really low health and I want to play conservative to make sure I don't die because I'm almost at the end of the fight, I like that one. Okay, yeah, so let's get on to the ones I don't like. I don't like, what's it? Nekori, the plant boss, that's like wrapped around the Chozo statue. Too much stuff. Way too much stuff. I feel that way about the Mother Brain fights. The first part of the Mother Brain fight in Super, and then the whole Mother Brain fight in Metroid 1 and Zero Mission. Too much stuff on the screen. Like, I don't like all the little things that float down and hit you from above. I absolutely hate the plants that, like, you get stuck in them and there's just no getting out. And then eventually the thing starts firing lasers, too, and it's just like, okay, yeah, no, you're throwing too much at me. I don't like the Omega Metroid fight at the end of the game. It's so annoying that every time you get hit, you have to go into that little, like, on the floor dying animation, and it's just so much of running back and forth and shooting. I don't know. I mean, yeah. But, oh my god. Neo Ridley with the screams? I didn't know that the Game Boy Advance could make sounds that loud. What is the deal with that? He also lags out the game pretty bad sometimes because it's just massive. He flies around and shoots projectiles, and yeah, I don't know. That boss fight's a little questionable, and to be frank, I mean, I think it serves a good purpose in the lore, so I cut it some slack because, like, I think showing a version of, Samus's nemesis corrupted by the X, her new biggest threat, like, that's powerful. That's a really powerful image. But, the fight is still kind of questionable. And I think that's about what I have to say about Metroid Fusion. All in all, one of my favorite Metroid games. So I'm going to go ahead and we only have 2 games left, you know. I think I have more interesting things to say about my second favorite game than my favorite game in the series. Both S tier, both really, really good. And I'm sure that's a bit shocking to hear, considering one of the games left is Metroid 2 Return of Samus. So I'm going to go ahead and actually skip ahead and say my first favorite game is Zero Mission. So yeah, I mean, I feel like most Metroid fans fall into 2 camps. Zero Mission fan, Super Metroid fan, and then there's the occasional Fusion fan. You know, I consider myself Zero Mission fan. This was personal reasons. Let's get into that first. This was like the game that set me down my path in life. You know, well, I guess that was Minecraft. My path in my gaming career, I suppose. This was the game that introduced me to the idea of an open world. You know, I felt like I could do anything. I was just used to playing, you know, Mario Bros. Wii, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and Mario Party DS. And, like, I would watch my dad play Metroid sometimes. He had a Game Boy Advance adapter for the GameCube. And I would watch him play it sometimes, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And my DS, you know, could play Game Boy Advance games. And occasionally I would borrow a Game Boy Advance game from him. And he told me, you know, like, I wanted to try Metroid quite a few times. And I got started on Zero Mission quite a few times and just never really spent more than just a few minutes playing it. And then one time, you know, I got started on it, and then, like, 10, 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes went by, you know, and he was like, that's when I knew you were hooked, you know. And I, like, yeah, I seriously was, like, and I've never become unhooked. This game, just, the world is so wonderful. Like, it feels so big for not actually being that big. And the openness of it is really a whole other level. Like, I play randomizers of this game quite a bit because there's, I mean, you actually don't even need that many items to get to the end game. You can kind of do a lot of things in any order. I love how Samus moves in this game. Like I said, I like the heavier GBA Samus. She just feels more grounded. Feels faster because of it. You know, I don't know if she's actually faster. I don't think she is actually than she is in Super. She feels faster because she spends less time in the air. You know, she sticks to the ground. And I like just tearing through, you know, and I love the fact that the game was designed around Speed Booster and around, like, getting from point A to point B quickly. Like, there's really only a small handful of rooms where it's difficult, if you know what you're doing, to get across the room quickly. Like, for the most part, you can tear through any room as long as you know where to point and shoot. You don't even have to stop holding forward. That's why it's such a satisfying speed game, too. Like, Super Metroid speedruns are really fun to watch, but I'm always going to be a Zero Mission fan. Like, that game feels so much faster. And there's less of a learning curve to get into it, too. I really think, like, I just can't complain. And the Space Pirate section, I think, is really cool. Although it does bring me to, actually, my one complaint. Remember when I said the whole SAX thing about using the power grip in Fusion? Yeah, so Space Pirate section honestly feels like a loving tribute to Fusion, which is awesome. I love that we take the survival horror elements from Fusion and the Metroid elements from Metroid 1, and we put them together into one game. It feels really coherent, even though it's kind of divided into 2 separate sections. One problem. Okay, well, I guess first of all, the space pirates deal too much damage on hit. And I don't like that you start off with 99 health no matter what when you enter the space pirate section of the game. Like, no matter how many energy tanks you have, it's a really, really weird choice. But one real flaw is oh, and I guess Mecha Ridley's a bit too easy too. I need to stop getting distracted. There's a moment in this game in the Space Pirate section, which I think is meant to evoke that SAX moment, where you jump up and grab onto a wall and you can just barely reach and pull yourself up and then crawl through. And then a space pirate comes in and he can't get to you, so he turns around and leaves. I think that moment's really dumb. Even though it's exactly the same as the Fusion SAX moment, because the difference is he could totally get to you. Like, the SAX just turning around and leaving in that moment tells you it has higher priorities, you know? And it's just not gonna bother if it can't catch you, you know? Here, the space pirate, I mean, their beams can destroy the bomb blocks, which is what that little tower thing is made out of. He could have shot through it. They can climb up walls and they can crawl through passages. Granted, I've never seen them do both at the same time. Like, if for some reason they were, like, vehemently opposed to just shooting through that wall in order to see if you're there, they could theoretically at least try to just climb up and crawl through. It just feels like it feels like the space pirate just didn't think it through. Like, instead of feeling like a moment where you really feel powerless like it is in Fusion, it just feels like you're just enemy is just stupid, and that doesn't make them a satisfying enemy at all. But you know, it is what it is, and given that that's my only real complaint about this whole game, oh, and I guess Mother Brain's a little bit annoying, but the fact that you can freeze the Rinka does make it a bit better, and the fact that you can stand on her platform if you space your little ball jump right. You know, it's a great game. It's definitely my favorite. It just feels like the definitive Metroid experience. And it's the one that taught me what I love about video games. So yeah, it's a great game. Now, breaking news, Lunatic puts Metroid 2 above Super Metroid. Yeah, I really, really like Metroid 2. Like, I think within the tiers, all the games are relatively close. Like, tier gap here, like, I think Super Metroid is significantly better than these, and I think Fusion is significantly better than Super Metroid. I think these two are significantly better than Fusion. Within the tiers, I think these three games are pretty much interchangeable. I think these two games are pretty much interchangeable. So now that I've really just said how much I love Metroid 2, how would I explain why? Well, Metroid 2, I guess I'll just start out with a story of how I ended up playing Metroid 2. It was a game that even though I knew it existed and I knew I liked Metroid, and I played, I mean, by the time that I played Metroid 2, I had played NES, Super, Fusion, and Zero Mission to completion. Zero Mission and Fusion quite a few times. I had never even considered playing Metroid 2. Because it's old, you know? And the gameplay looks really clunky. And, like, the screen is so zoomed in on Samus. Like, so many repetitive boss fights. The room design isn't really, like, unique between rooms. A lot of stuff feels samey, and it already has a remake. So why play it. I'll tell you why. Because I have a Texas Instruments 84 Color Edition calculator. You know what's special about that calculator? I won't get too much into techie stuff, but I think this is really cool. Calculator runs on a Z80 processor, which is an 8-bit microprocessor. And that processor was modified to create the custom processor used in the Game Boys and Game Boy Color systems. So, on a technical level, Game Boy TI-84 functionally very similar in terms of what they can do. If a Game Boy can do it, a TI-84 can pretty much do it, other than playing sound. And because of that, some absolute genius developed a program called TI Boy CE, which is a Game Boy emulator that runs on TI-84 Color Edition calculators. And I, as a freshman, was bored of school. You know, I had to carry this graphing calculator around with me all the time because I was in pre-calc and, pre-calc. And I couldn't play my video games all the time in study hall. Like, I want to play some Metroid in study hall, but frankly, those online emulators that I had to use on my school-issued computer because I couldn't download a real emulator just weren't really satisfying that itch, And now, I had actually done a lot of research prior to discovering TI Boy CE because I had this idea in my head of the Z80 and the Game Boy processors are very similar. I should be able to convert a Game Boy game to run on my calculator, right? And when I finally discovered somebody had made an automated way to do that, I was just ecstatic. So I installed the program on my calculator. First thing I put on there, I think, was Tetris. Because I was just like, let's just test this out. Tetris is a great, simple Game Boy game. Boot it up, and it just works perfectly. I've dumped my own Game Boy ROMs in the past. I have a thing to do that. I put my ROM of Pokemon Blue on there, But then there was one Game Boy game I'd never played before that I was intrigued by. I felt like, I had really gotten back into my Metroid phase at this point. If I give you the timeline a little bit here of my Metroid, my love of Metroid, I got so into Metroid when I was a little kid, and it was like my favorite game franchise. Zero Mission in particular, I just played all the time. I tried Super Metroid, but I found it a lot harder. I tried Fusion, but I found it a lot harder too. I tried NES, but I found it impossibly hard. That kind of thing. But I really, I just loved that franchise. That was my franchise, And then I heard about this little indie game called Minecraft. And I experience very, very strong, pointed interests that, as they come and go, can sort of dominate entire periods of my life. And no single other thing has ever done that to me like Minecraft did. I went from when I learned about Minecraft and played it for the first time in 3rd grade up until about midway through 6th grade. Probably not a day went by that I didn't think about Minecraft, that I didn't play Minecraft, that I didn't watch a Minecraft video. I mean, no, not all of those things necessarily, but I probably after school, I was either watching a Minecraft YouTube video or I was playing Minecraft. I had multiple versions of Minecraft. I had the Pocket Edition, I had the Xbox 360 Edition, and I had the Java Edition. And I would just Minecraft all the time. And eventually, I started to break away from that. But that, I realized only recently that I never really came back to Metroid after that. I stopped playing Metroid because I was always playing Minecraft. And then when I was in my freshman year, I was taking a vacation. And I thought about how when I was a little kid, anytime we would go on a road trip, go on vacation, I would always take my blue Nintendo DS Lite, my copy of Metroid Zero Mission, and I would play it all the way there and back in the car. We'd go visit family in Colorado, or we'd go... Or no, I guess that was actually before I started playing Metroid, then my family moved here. We would go to South Dakota for vacations to see Mount Rushmore and to, see the buffalo and whatever other stuff you do in South Dakota. And I would play Metroid the whole way there and back, And so many, formative gaming memories came from that. And I was just thinking about that when we were taking our vacation. And I was like, I should play Metroid Zero Mission in the car. That's what I should do. Now, I long since lost my original cartridge. I do have a new one now, and that blue DS, but I got it on an emulator on my computer. And I played it the whole way there, and this time, I was a much better gamer. And I got almost all the way through the entire game in that, 2-hour trip. Whereas before, it would take me 24 hours to get all the way through the game. And I just was hooked again. That was just it. I played it then all the way on the way back, and then I just played it over and over and over and over and over again. And this is how my speedrunning started. At first, it was just me playing the game over and over again and getting faster and faster, and then I started going to the internet and learning ways to get even faster, But then my love of Metroid was relaunched, and this was around the same time, not that much longer afterwards was when I was setting up this Game Boy emulator on my calculator, and I was like, I should try out Metroid 2, The Return of Samus. And that was one of the greatest decisions I ever made. So, a little bit more personal stories here, and then we're going to get into the objective why this game is so underrated. I will just say high school has been a very, very trying experience for me. Even before the pandemic. I just have struggled a lot. And having something that I could find comfort in throughout the school day, anytime I had a spare moment, anytime I had a study hall, in Metroid 2, that was really wonderful. That redefined my high school experience in a way. It helped me ease so much of the pain. And I just got so immersed into the game, And now I'll go into the real game details. Why did this game end up meaning so much to me? It's somber. It's odd. It's sad. It's eerie and creepy, It's not a happy, cheer you up kind of game. But that's not what I needed, The atmosphere of the game just feels so much darker than any of the other Metroid games. Even than the, dreadfully isolating NES game or the terrifying Fusion. This game feels dark and big and empty and scary and lonely. The pure black backgrounds, not being able to see the walls and the floor most of the time because the camera is so zoomed in. You know, nothing that looks at all familiar anywhere around you. Like, just these weird monsters and misshapen rocks everywhere. So much walking, so much just slowly moving from point A to point B. And while I was all on about how much I love the speed of Zero Mission and to a lesser extent of Dread and Fusion, that slow ambling about from place to place gives you so much time to get immersed and to think and to feel, and it lets the game's atmosphere sink in like no other Metroid game does, you know. I like a lot of the I kind of like the repetitiveness of it in a way. I like that it's kind of boring to play for a long time in one sitting. It feels like a handheld game. Other than the save points being really far apart. Because there's just so much of like just walking from point A to point B and then killing the Metroid and then walking again. And so much just like little tasks that you just do over and over again. You know, it's very reliable. There's one thing in the game that gets some hate that I think is wonderful. The last area with the Omega Metroids, there's no recharge point. Not within that area, not within the previous area. The nearest one is all the way back, way back. You have to go all the way across that whole area and the previous area, and then you get out into the other area, and then it's like halfway through there. So much walking. It's like 20 minutes both ways. And I can do like, what I'll tend to do is I'll go in, do the first fight, go back, heal, do the second and third fights, go back, heal, and then you go onto the Queen's Lair. Excuse me. And that's so much of nothing. But the emptiness of those final few areas, as you progress through the game, there are less and less enemies. And that might seem, you know, counterproductive. It goes against what you would expect. Because games usually get harder when you get towards the end. You know, more enemies throwing more stuff at you to see if you've mastered your skills. But no. Because this game prioritizes its atmosphere over that. This game wants to show you how powerful these late-stage Metroids are, and it shows you that by the last area, I think, only has 4 total enemies that aren't Metroids in the entire area. Imagine if you were walking through Brinstar, and there were only 4 enemies in the entire area. I know a lot of you haven't played Metroid 2, so I use that as an example. That amount of isolation, that amount of time to just to ruminate, to perseverate, you know, on the things the game is throwing at you, especially when it's a game that's throwing some questions at you, you know, like, is what you're doing right? Now that's something that we get into a lot more at the very end of the game. After you kill the Queen Metroid, one final Metroid larva hatches out of its egg right before your eyes. You lose control of Samus for a second as an automated cutscene of sorts plays out, where the Metroid flies around you, Samus cocks her gun, aims it up at the Metroid, and then stops. And she lets her gun rest at her side. Metroid orbits around her and follows her as she walks back up to the surface, and this beautiful, calming, somewhat optimistic track plays. And, you know, that moment is so powerful because it recontextualizes the whole game. Like, if all this time the game has given you to think what wasn't enough, now the game is really asking you, did you do the right thing? And now later games, one of the things I love about Fusion and about Super that I didn't go too much into is that they really explicitly tell you, especially Fusion, no, you did not do the right thing. And in particular, this moment is great in the context of the debatably canon Metroid comics, Metroid manga, as it were, that establishes Samus's backstory that's usually heralded as gospel by the Metroid fan base, even though its recognition by Nintendo is inconsistent, to say the least. Where Ridley storms the station where Samus's family lives and kills everybody besides Samus. You know, Samus watches her parents die in front of her. This is where she watched her parents die, Parappa. And it's what makes Samus who she is. You know, it's what makes Samus the cold, powerful warrior bounty hunter that she is. You know, she was so traumatized by that she's just kind of turned off her emotions. And in this final moment of Metroid 2, Samus has invaded the home world of the Metroids, and she's killed all of them, including the Queen, you know, their mother. And then this larva hatches, and at least in my mind, the way that this beautifully open for interpretation scene plays out in my head is that Samus looks at that Metroid, and she's gonna just autopilot kill it, finish the job. And she remembers being that Metroid. And now that Metroid is her, and she is Ridley. You know? And that's really, really powerful. And that, to me, is why Samus drops her gun. She doesn't kill the Metroid. She takes it in. Because even though she can't undo what she's done, she can try her best to make up for it. And this is why, even though people go all in on Other M, this is why Samus was so invested in the baby. Because the baby was her. And it's just wonderful. You know, I like the starry sky when you get back to the surface, jumping down the cliff on the left side that you could never navigate up before to get back to your ship where you started the game. It's just wonderful. Metroid 2 is a fantastic and exceptionally underrated game. And, you know, I could probably make a whole other video just talking about Metroid 2. I'd rehash a lot of the same points again. But really, just Metroid 2 makes me feel things that no other video game has ever made me feel. So it really deserves to finally get the recognition it's been denied for all these years. So, I've been VC. This has been my opinions on the 2D Metroid franchise. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would guess if you stuck around for this long, you probably did. If you did, you know, I might start posting to this channel more frequently, because I've discovered a style of content that I like to make. even if maybe it's not going to get as many views as my old content. But I'll say what I said in the last video. I'm really passionate about video games and about game design. And, you know, when I play a game like Metroid 2 that makes me feel so much, what I really want to do is learn from that and use that, build off of it to make a game that's even better. And I'm trying. Alongside a small development team, I am part of the team Coalition. We're working on our first game right now, and if you want to receive updates on the game as it's announced, as trailers come out, pre-release materials, you should subscribe to the Coalition YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter. Both of those are linked in the description of this video. So I look forward to speaking to you again whenever that is, and in the meantime, I hope that you look forward to seeing more content, not only videos like this, but regarding my own games. Goodbye.